welcome. As I was digging into the sources for this deep dive, one thing really stood out. Have you ever stopped to think about the full story? One nation dropping atomic bombs on another, not just once, but twice. Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I mean, the names themselves carry so much weight, even today. But was it simply revenge? Payback for Pearl Harbor? Or was something else going on? Maybe deeper, more complex reasons, political, military. So, okay, let's unpack this. What was the true story behind this incredibly destructive event?
Exactly. And that's what we're hoping to do in this deep dive. We want to guide you through the history, the context leading up to it, the immediate shockwaves, and then maybe most importantly, the reasons behind these huge decisions that often get, less airtime, helping you understand not just what happened, but really why it still matters so much.
Okay, so let's set the scene. We need to go back to 1945. Picture it. The war in Europe, it's finally ending. Germany's defeated, Hitler's dead, victory in Europe, VE Day, it's happened. But the fight's not totally over, not yet. Because across the Pacific, Japan is, crucially, still fighting. And they're showing absolutely no signs of surrendering. The Allies, America, they're exhausted, years of war. And the Japanese military, well, they had this fierce reputation, right? This belief in suicidal attacks, unconditional fighting to the last person.
Mm-hmm. And that created a terrifying problem for the strategists, a real dilemma. American military planners, they actually ran the numbers. They estimated that a full ground invasion of Japan, the home islands, it could cost, somewhere between maybe 1 to 2 million American soldiers' lives. Just think about that number. It's staggering. A human cost that was, frankly, almost too high to contemplate for the leadership.
Yeah, unimaginable. And it's right then, against that backdrop, that this new terrifying weapon sort of enters the picture, the atomic bomb, developed in total secrecy, wasn't it, under the Manhattan Project. And then July 1945, they test it successfully out in the New Mexico desert.
That's right, the Trinity test. And this huge technological leap, it directly connected with the situation with Japan. Japan's refusal, their absolute refusal to accept unconditional surrender, even though the Allies kept demanding it. That refusal, it really paved the way for the U.S. to make that unthinkable decision, to use this new weapon, to target Hiroshima and then Nagasaki.
So the first strike, August 6, 1945, 8:15 in the morning, the little boy bomb is dropped on Hiroshima. And just, let's pause on that, 43 seconds. In just 33 seconds, an entire city, people starting their day, just gone, reduced to ash. The human cost, it's horrifying. Estimates are around 80,000 people died instantly right there, but millions more. They died slowly from radiation sickness for months, for years afterwards.
And here's something that's really striking and maybe not always highlighted. Despite that level of destruction, that immediate, unimaginable horror, Japan still didn't surrender. Not right away.
That's incredible. Even after Hiroshima.
Yeah.
They still didn't give in. What does that tell you about their mindset? Or maybe there were other things happening behind the scenes. And then just 3 days later, it wasn't over. The second strike, August 9th, 1945. This time, Nagasaki, the Fat Man bomb. And again, instant devastation. Around 40,000 people killed immediately. A huge part of the city just wiped out.
Yeah. At that point, after the second bomb, the sheer scale of it, it was overwhelming. Japan realistically had no other option left. There was nowhere to go. So 5 days later, August 14th, they finally announced their surrender. And that officially was the end of World War II.
Okay, so we've got the timeline, the official reason, and the war, save lives from an invasion. But like you said, there's more to it. As we look through the sources, it's clear there were these other potential motives, right? Deeper ones, more controversial. And this next part, for me, this is where it gets really interesting. It kind of shifts how you might see the whole thing.
Absolutely. One major factor that comes up is the relationship with the Soviet Union, or rather the lack of trust there. Remember, the war in Europe is over, but the Cold War is already sort of brewing. Tensions are high. At the Potsdam Conference, just weeks before Hiroshima, you could already see the Allies, particularly the U.S. and the Soviets, clashing over what post-war Europe would look like. So dropping the bomb, it wasn't just aimed at Japan. Some argue it was also a very clear, very dramatic message to Stalin, a demonstration of this new, incredible power that only America had at that moment. It was about asserting dominance on the world stage, strengthening America's hand in that emerging post-war world. Geopolitical chess, really.
Wow. So a message to the Soviets. Okay. And then there's this other theory, which is frankly pretty disturbing. The idea that maybe Japan was used as a kind of live lab to test the bombs. What's the thinking behind that?
Right, that's a very controversial interpretation, and historians are divided on it. to be clear. But the argument some sources make is that Hiroshima and Nagasaki weren't just chosen because they were military or industrial targets. They were chosen specifically because they were different. They had different layouts, population densities, different geography. Hiroshima on a flat delta, Nagasaki in hills and valleys. And this, the theory goes, allowed the U.S. military and scientists to observe, to measure, to compare the effects of the two different types of bombs. Little boy was uranium, fat man was plutonium under varied conditions, gathering data. Really valuable data from their perspective about this new weapon's power and effects. It suggests maybe a colder, more calculated motive beyond just ending the war, thinking about future weapons, future conflict.
A live lab. That raises some serious ethical questions, doesn't it? If that was even part of the calculation. And all this feeds into the big debate, the one that still goes on today very passionately. Was dropping the bombs a necessary evil? A terrible but ultimately unavoidable choice to end the war quickly and save potentially millions of lives that might have been lost in that invasion? Or was it an inhumane act, crossing a fundamental line, setting a terrifying precedent for, the nuclear age?
Exactly. That's the core tension. And there's no easy answer. It forces us to confront really difficult questions about warfare, about power, about morality. 2 bombs, millions affected, not just the dead, but the survivors, the hibakusha, their children. The radiation effects lasting generations, centuries even. It wasn't just an event that changed Japan. It fundamentally altered the course of world history, the way nations interact, the shadow we all live under in a way.
So wrapping this up for today, thinking about everything we've just discussed, all these layers, what does it all mean for you listening right now as we've walked through these different perspectives of these different sources? What really stands out to you about this moment, this pivot point in history?
Yeah, it really makes you think, doesn't it? How events we think we know can have so many hidden complexities, so many different angles. It highlights how these huge historical moments often involve layers upon layers of motivation, some clear, some murky, and the consequences just ripple outwards. It forces us, I think, to constantly re-examine what we think is right or wrong, especially when faced with that kind of unimaginable power. A lot to reflect on there.